Well, Democrats in the Senate are fighting to pass legislation to preserve abortion rights at a federal level before the Supreme Court releases its ruling on the issue. Caitlin Huey-Burns is in Washington now with more on the vote that is scheduled for this week. Thanks for joining us, Caitlin. So this is a bill that's already passed in the House, but what are you hearing from lawmakers about how it's going to play out?
Good morning, Emery. Well, this is not likely to gain any traction in the Senate. Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, put this same exact bill up for a vote earlier this year in February, and it failed to pass, failed to get enough votes to overcome a filibuster. And Joe Manchin, Democratic senator, actually voted with Republicans at the time to prevent it from coming up for a debate. So the votes aren't there, even within the Democratic Party, for this legislation. But the reason that Chuck Schumer is doing this, he knows he doesn't have the votes, but the reason that he's doing this is really to kind of set down a political marker and set a message ahead of the midterm elections and show that Democrats largely are wanting to codify abortion rights into federal law while Republicans are opposed. Now, there's some nuances here. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, two Republicans, have put forward their own legislation to codify Roe into law, and that's a more straightforward approach. They argue that the bill that Schumer and Democrats have is a little bit too wide-ranging, so they want it more narrowly focused. The majority leader could assume some of the provisions in their bill, but what he really wants to do is say that they're not compromising on abortion rights, and they are wanting to put this bill down, again, to set that political message. So when you look at it in terms of a messaging bill, that's really what it is. And this is an attempt, of course, by Democrats who think that this is going to be an issue in the midterm elections that really galvanizes folks. And they have little recourse to prevent this from happening, to prevent Roe from happening, being overturned, but they want to be able to show that they are doing what they can to preserve abortion rights. And so we'll see whether this is something that galvanizes Democrats in the midterms.
Democrats are warning, Caitlin, if the court overturns Roe, other rights could be next. Hillary Clinton talked about that with Norah O'Donnell last week. Let me play a bit of what she said.
Any American who says, look, I'm not a woman, this doesn't affect me, I'm not black, that doesn't affect me, I'm not gay, that doesn't affect me. Once you allow this kind of extreme power to take hold, you have no idea who they will come for next.
So, Caitlin, how big of a concern is this for lawmakers, and how realistic is it?
Well, Vlad, this is something that you're hearing a lot from Democrats. Even Nancy Pelosi, the House Majority Leader, the House Speaker, told Face the Nation, you know, if this happens, then what's next? So you're hearing a lot from Democrats that they're very concerned about other rights that might be taken away if the Supreme Court does, in fact, overturn Roe. And they're especially concerned about what's happening at the state level now that you have, party trifectas in these states. You're seeing all of this legislation pass at the state level and then challenge Supreme Court precedent, which is what we've seen with Roe. Now, conservatives argue, and Alito argued in this draft opinion that was leaked, that this shouldn't be seen as an attempt to overturn other precedents. But a lot of lawmakers are not exactly taking him at his word for that, and they are concerned about things like the preservation of rights for same-sex marriage, other rights that are not specifically mentioned in the Constitution, because that's kind of the basis for this, that abortion is not specifically mentioned. Of course, when the Constitution was written, it was written by all men. This was not something that was kind of considered, of course. So that's kind of where there is the concern. So, Republican lawmakers that I've been asking on Capitol Hill are trying to kind of separate the two and trying not to exactly go there just yet. But that is something to keep an eye on, whether, in fact, this does lead to states pushing legislation in the states in the attempt to kick it up to the Supreme Court.
So codifying abortion rights at the federal level is probably not going to happen. But what about the flip side of this argument, right? Is there any support for a federal ban on abortion, say if the GOP wins back the majority in Congress?
Yeah, Anne-Marie, it's a great question, and that's something that I've been asking Republican lawmakers last week when I was up on Capitol Hill. And, it's interesting to kind of hear their answer. Some Republicans told me, look, they're not ready to go there just yet. They know that they do not have the votes in the Senate to make a federal ban on abortions. The votes just aren't there. They don't even have the support among Republicans, so they kind of fall back to that. But some of them, haven't really been able to answer whether they would support such legislation if it came up for a vote in a majority Republican Senate. And this is a significant question to pose to Republicans because their argument about overturning Roe is a states' rights-based argument. They are saying that the Supreme Court, when you look at what they're saying and the messaging that they're putting out from the campaigns, they are saying that the court should not decide abortion rights, the states should. But if you are proposing a federal ban on abortion, that really flies in the face, of course, of the states' rights argument. So this is something to pay attention to, especially in terms of the midterms, if Republicans do, in fact, take control. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, who would very much like to become the Majority Leader, has said that he is not willing to blow up the filibuster for abortion legislation. But this is a question that, should and will be coming up, whether there is support for such a thing if they indeed gain seats.
How are both parties leveraging this draft opinion ahead of the midterms?
Well, Vlad, Democrats are hoping that this is something that really galvanizes Democrats who feel really demoralized right now with everything going on, inflation, the economy. They have all of these items working against them. So they're hoping that this is something that specifically targets women and helps, turn them out in the midterms. But it's really interesting to see how Republicans are playing this, because this is an issue for years and years and years that have galvanized Republicans to turn out to vote. Lots of Republican voters are kind of single issue voters on this measure, not only on abortion, but also about the idea of reforming the court so that they could, in fact, take up this very issue. That's something that we saw in 2016, something that helped Donald Trump get elected. But it's fascinating to watch how Republicans are talking about this. Donald Trump was out on the campaign trail this weekend in Pennsylvania campaigning for a Senate candidate. He did not mention Roe versus Wade, which is really a significant thing, considering that he is responsible for reshaping the court in the conservative viewpoint. That's something that he could champion as his legacy, something that Republicans had been excited about him in his presidency, but he's not talking about it. Republicans on Capitol Hill equally are not declaring any sort of victory, and they've been telling me, well, we're waiting for the exact opinion to come out. This is just a draft. But it's important to look at the politics here. In our own polling that came out over the weekend, majority support keeping Roe versus Wade in place, and we've actually seen an uptick in support for making abortion generally available since that opinion came out. So this is a political issue that they know doesn't work for them as they're trying to expand support and gain votes in the midterms. But it's fascinating. A party that has really been focused on this issue is not celebrating this just yet. I think says a lot about the politics, especially Trump not talking about it.
It's complicated.
It is complicated. Caitlin, thank you very much as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.